Hello, I'm your host, Effie Pilarino, and today I have another wonderful lady with me with whom I have connected in the digital world in several different ways. We have memories starting from Davos, when Davos was physical, when it was in Switzerland, when the Digital Economist was launched there, when the 100 Women in Davos was created as a group, and so many connecting threads. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest today, Navroop Sadhev, who is joining us. And let me say a couple of things that sort of give you pointers as to who Navroop is and where she's putting her energy. She'll be talking and telling us more about the Digital Economist, which is her big if you want, initiative and her focus, but she's also been involved in academia. She is a fellow, science fellow, I believe, at MIT. She's been part of the blockchain technology group at UCL, and she's also part of a VC. She'll be telling us more. Navroop, welcome. So please tell us, first of all, a little bit about your journey, where you're coming from, what dots you've connected up until now.
Yeah, Effie, thank you so much. So delighted to be here. And I know we missed each other in Davos because we were so, focused on the launch of the Digital Economist. We missed each other and we missed you at the event. But I'm so glad we're meeting now, still in the digital world. But we will soon, I'm sure, physically as well. So thank you for having me today. I'm so excited to be here and kind of, as you mentioned, connect the dots to so many different threads I've been working on over the past years, but obviously in particular in emerging technologies. But yeah, I'm born and raised in India, and I've lived in 8 countries, 14 cities since then. It's been pretty exciting, and been in the United States for the past 6 years now. Originally came here as a research fellow at Harvard Kennedy, the Kennedy School of Government, to do my thesis work. It's interesting because 6 years down the line, that's still something that is so important and relevant, thanks to that experience and how that shaped me, the kind of access that opened up and provided to also now, which was on externalities. So how do we internalize the cost of externalities, but also tap into the innovation that knowledge externalities provide? And so ever since, been focusing on emerging technologies, started working at an asset management company, and stumbled upon blockchain. I was looking at how our public markets, particularly in the United States, are are rigged, for the lack of a better term. If you look at high speed, high frequency trading, front running, I've read this book called Flash Boys by Michael Lewis, and it really opened up my eyes to what all was happening with algorithmic trading over the past 20 years or so. It's interesting because we're talking about it today because the person he talks about in the book, Brad Katsuyama, I think that's his name, we just connected on LinkedIn yesterday. And I was like, oh my gosh, this Brad, same guy in the book. So life is long and short at the same time. So yeah, let me pause here.
And by the way, Navroop, my first job was at Salmon Brothers. So I know all the characters that Michael Lewis was talking about. And I do remember as a PhD student reading The Liar's Poker and all the mentality of the street. But it's ironic today because we have Robin Hood, which is perpetuating that culture of selling order flow and front running and so on. So over to you. Sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
but it's a passion.
I think you probably know more about this. And this was 5-6 years ago. But yeah, ever since been focusing on emerging technologies. In fact, one of the things I learned, I'll just kind of jump right in here, is the fact that it's not just about a technology, but what the convergence of technologies should together. So I've done a whole bunch of stuff, and you probably see it out there on this convergence. So there's another piece which is kind of relevant to mention is on the types of convergence, which I think is usually interesting for folks. Not just about emerging tech like blockchain plus AI plus cloud, but also traditional and emerging tech, right? With the systems we currently have and how emerging technologies can transform that. And then also human capabilities plus technology. So those are kind of the three areas of convergence it's very exciting. And over the past 2 years, with the Digital Economist, which is a year and a half old now, a post-pandemic digital baby, if you may. We are looking at how do you design better systems? How do you design systems that are anti-fragile, not just robust and resilient? And it's just been, what a fantastic intellectual journey of learning and journey of service, ultimately towards human outcomes. And I would say this, when I was in school pursuing my second and third masters in economics, and when I learned about the fact that it's mostly just neoclassical economics that's taught in the West. So it's just kind of perpetuating a single way of thinking and looking at the world. I noticed that the notion of economics in every industry, as I held professional roles, executive roles, was that, oh, it's about money and that's it. When economics is not about money, it is about money as well, but it's about humans. And so I decided to be the economist who talks about human outcomes, because I could speak that from a place of legitimacy, as somebody who is formally trained in the profession. So, and that's kind of is a lot of the translation of that, what all that means in terms of products and services and strategies for businesses, that keeps me busy. And I think I will be busy for a long time. So let me pause here.
So Navrup, you're making the very important distinction between finance and economics, and I think it's not acknowledged. We're not aware of it. As you said, we talk about economics, but we really mean finances, and we forget about the broad term, and again the etymology of the word economy, and I'm biased here, which is Greek, is about managing ecos, your home, your household, the broader community. So it has much broader aspects than just the pure finances. So tell us a little bit more about the Digital Economist. I mean, on the surface, it's a newsletter that one can subscribe, or that there's a speaker series. Tell us a little bit more about that and the content. I mean, I'm a big fan, and I see it as you said, this convergence between humans and machines, and it's all about partnerships, I guess, with others, and bringing different angles to the spotlight. But tell us some of the topics, the recent topics that you're covering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it took us some time to figure it out. So if you're right, I get this question: what is it really? And the short answer is we're building it every day. But here's a more nuanced answer. We are an entire ecosystem, right? Our mission is to build a human-centered economy globally. And that goes beyond just the Sustainable Development Goals or the ESG, environmental sustainability and governance space, which is just the common minimum denominator that all stakeholders need to align to. But that's not the end goal. If you actually want to have a thriving planet, then we need to extend beyond that. So we look beyond just those, and we look beyond just stakeholder capitalism, right? Which is accounting for different stakeholders. It doesn't talk about, for example, inequality as much as it's shared. It doesn't talk about exactly how you're gonna, create value that's equally distributed from the get-go, ex ante, rather than ex post, which is redistribution of value. Most of the economic theories so far have utterly failed and fell on their faces. Things like the trickle down effect. After 70 years, the World Bank says, oh yeah, that's crap, that never really worked. So it's interesting, right? And so I've been talking about this new world economic order, with sort of the common minimum denominator of the sustainable development goals. How can we build a better world and leverage tech to do so? Because we would have to. And a lot of people in our circles are about, just they talk about technology, but then the question to ask is towards what outcomes. So I spent a lot of time, introspecting and asking colleagues that same question. Colleagues at the World Bank, at IMF, at the best places you can think of, right? And now I think you're starting to see this needle that's moving. That ultimately it needs to serve human outcomes, and planetary outcomes, right? And other species. And so we kind of have this definition of what that means. So under this ecosystem, we have a number of initiatives, including the speaker series that you just mentioned, and every newsletter that we publish a position or a policy paper on. But essentially what we're really doing is we're taking tools, cutting edge tools from economics, science, behavioral sciences, so on and so forth. We are anti-disciplinary. We don't really believe in just sticking to a certain discipline to look for answers or innovation. And we apply that to sticky problems that industry professionals and government professionals are facing. And so from that emerges different types of initiatives, different types of partnerships. And we're very agile about it. We put together consortiums, we put together working groups. So yeah, depending on, again, what we're looking at, the past year, we spent a lot of time with COVID as well, focusing on global risks, a massive global risk portfolio that we're facing that's not fully accounted for. In the beginning of the pandemic, we did a piece in Forbes called, how the COVID-19 pandemic was basically created by humans, and how we stress our ecosystems and increase the probability of the so-called long tail events. It's not an unknown. It's not a black swan event. It's a known unknown. And then we did this piece called the gray rhino. The fact that we knew this was going to happen, but we just didn't know when. So, and these sort of things have been quite surprising for the community. But for us, I think it was like known since a long time as complex system scientists and computational economists. You start your first agent-based model with this one agent that goes about spreading an infectious disease, as you know, and we very quickly see that it perpetuates in the system. And so that's sort of learning in real life as it's playing out. It's so important from an education perspective. It's so important from a systems thinking perspective. And we really need to retire old frameworks on GDP and just like, ESG to that extent too, because it's so limited, right? And like cost benefit analysis, just very linear systems that don't account for interdependencies around the world. And I hope that COVID-19 is a wake-up call for the world.
Yeah. I mean, I must admit that I'm infected by the ideas when I read the Digital Economist, the gray rhino being a recent one, and I kind of take it and think through that lens in my more sort of narrow, if you want, world of what is going on in fintech, which is also broadening, because I mean, if you think of it, payments and trade is everywhere, and it is very interesting how we are shifting our thinking, and I hope that this continues more. I know, Navroop, that you specifically are very interested in the concept of what is value, how we define value and how we measure it. And that I think is so timely, because we are rethinking everything. And again, I'm coming from the angle of what is money, let alone what is a bank and so on. But what is money? And tell us a little bit about that line of work, and how the ecosystem that you're building is working on this very important aspect. And there's a lot of arguments now in social media of what is value and what is a real asset, versus not a real asset, and so on.
Yeah, that's interesting. So in 2018, we wrote a paper on how value is created in tokenized assets. So we ended up publishing that in what is the first book on blockchain economics, which came out in January 2019. And it's a reader, so that means different authors write different chapters, and a few editors sort of compile that. But what we did was we took a step back and we asked the more fundamental question on how value is created, perceived, and measured, to your point, over and beyond just the digital asset space, which is really what triggered, of course, the initial sort of thinking of which tokens have values and which ones don't, right? That was the first thing we were debating. What emerged is the first paper on behavioral economics applied to token valuation. And from insights from behavioral economics and other sort of general cognitive sciences, we concluded that ultimately all value is perceived value. And it depends on a variety of factors in sort of the context that it's embedded in. And so a glass of water has a different value when you can just fill it from your tap at home, versus you're stuck in a desert, and if you don't get water you may not live. So what would you give for a glass of water there? How would you price that, right? And so a lot of that thinking sort of goes in. And another example is the public markets. They are over 100 years old now, so they're formalized. So there's history of demand and supply, price, transactions, processes, settlement times, so on and so forth. But it wasn't always like that, right? So the public markets also started at some point, and you can sort of see how the digital asset space is kind of booming the same way. In the beginning, there is no real anchor unless enough history exists that people start to consider that reality. People start to take that as the source of truth. And that's sort of what we mean when we say a price is established, right? And all economics talks about it by demand and supply. And so there's no such thing as intrinsic value. And that's I think the key takeaway of the paper. And it's a fun read, so I encourage anyone who's interested to find it. You can find before the peer-reviewed version of it on Social Science Research Network, SSRN. And I think that same thinking should also inform as a new wave of digital assets are popping up. And a lot of things in the digital asset space is sort of begging that question. Ultimately, it's about where does a community perceive value and sort of why. And those reasons could be numerous. But I mean, money is a collective hallucination. There is no intrinsic value in money. It's just something we all decide has value. So we perceive there is value in it.
We can say that there's consensus by now that this mental construct that we call money, and there's many other ones, like, there's many legal concepts like the limited liability corporation, that it took a very long time the community or the economy or us humans to accept it as a valuable mental construct. And there's many of those, right, that we have. But we talk about them now because they have history as if they are the truth. And as you said, we claim that they have intrinsic value. We bring up examples, but we are really saying what you said, that they have enough history and enough consensus that we attach to them some reality, right? And we are at the start of redesigning something new and going through the process.
Right, right. I think that's fair to say. Of course, with the internet, um, that history exists, right? So fiat is not going anywhere, um, and there's always would be that anchor as well moving forward, because systems are path dependent. That means it just doesn't go away. It takes into account history. It has memory, as we say. So I think that redesigning provides us an opportunity to build better, more efficient, and more equitable systems. But it also means that we will be living with what has happened so far. So it's very important to design, evaluate with care.
Very interesting. Navroop, I'd like to wrap up our conversation, and definitely with you, I will make sure that we have all the links that we reference. But tell our audience where they can find you, the Digital Economist, how they can participate in this ecosystem, whether it's individuals, companies, how can they be part of this?
Yeah, great question. So you can find me on all social media, I guess. LinkedIn is great, but also at just Navroop at thedigitaleconomist.com or Navroop at mit.edu. And yeah, the website is thedigitaleconomist.com. And to your question around how folks can participate, there are many ways. We have partner organizations whom we partner at the company level. Very exciting, because that opens up the door to working on a lot of initiatives and projects. The other is participating and signing up to be a fellow with the Center of Excellence on Human-Centered Digital Economy. That is sort of the brain of the ecosystem, and that houses the initiatives, the insights that go into your point, and in the newsletters, and the innovation that we are sort of putting out in the world. And then we're also hiring. So that seems to be a little bit of a constant always. So you can look for the open positions. Again, LinkedIn is a great place to start. Also, kind of our company page there. And yeah, and as I mentioned, we have some other big announcements in the pipeline around our advisory services and a bunch of events we're always part of, a whole bunch of things. We're always collaborating with amazing folks like yourself, Effie, and their synergies we explore, and with common threads, which there's a lot more since COVID. We work together on a variety of things. So look out for that announcement as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Navroop. Great having you with us.
Thank you for having me, Effie.